Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to show you how to crosshatch a nose, and I'm going to show you a few different ways that you can do that, and also some of the major things to avoid when you're trying to crosshatch a nose for your portraits. If you're interested in drawing portraits, it's useful to do studies of different parts of the face, right? So there's going to be one on lips that I already did, and now there's one for noses. Okay, so let's get going. So I start out by just lightly drawing the nose. And in this, I'm not using a pencil sketch, but you definitely can if you want. And what you want to be thinking about when you're drawing the nose is looking really closely at the shape of the person that you're drawing, whether it's a photograph or you're drawing from life. Everyone's nose is obviously very distinct and different. So you always want to be looking at the specific shapes and angles that make up the nose of the actual person that you're drawing. So you'll see throughout this video, I'm going to draw, a handful of different noses, and they're all going to be different because they're, people have obviously different shapes and sizes and things for their noses. And so when you're drawing a portrait, what's very important is, of course, things like the proportions and measuring, but it's also noticing those details that make up the likeness of the person. And that's what's going to help make it look like the person you're drawing, is when you're accurately observing the specific shape of the person's nose or eyes or mouth or whatever, right? So it's with portraits, it's important to get a sense of how those different features interact and to get the right spacing between, the eyes and the nose and so on. But you also want to really work on observing the specific shape. And so that's what we're going to really be working on in this video, is how do you actually do that, right? And this person here, like, this is a more kind of like delicate shaped nose, right? As opposed to like more angled. So those are some of the things that you want to observe with whatever you're drawing, right? Like, is it a more angled nose? Is it kind of more soft or subtle? And then the thing with drawing is a lot of times, when you're cross hatching, you're doing a lot of shading. And so for shading, I am going around, I'm not just doing the nose, but I'm also doing the area underneath, which sort of helps make the nose pop a little bit. And so you also want to look at whatever nose you're drawing. You want to notice and observe things like where the reflections are. So generally speaking, the reflection is going to be kind of like in that ball part of the nose, because that's where the light generally will catch, or on the bridge of the nose. Of course, it can vary depending on the lighting situation. But generally speaking, if you're in a regular room and there's light in the room, it's going to hit the top of your nose and it's going to make it a little bit lighter. So that's another thing just to keep in mind. So one of the most common things that people do when they're trying to draw noses and they're struggling is people will sometimes have really hard edges or like sharp edges and almost like an outline. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to outline your drawing. You want to have it be kind of softer edges, because that's more realistic, right? So there's not actually like a line around your nose. The nose just looks like it's in shadow, and so that's what you're really trying to show, is more like the shadows and the highlights and the midtones, as opposed to, say, just like drawing a line around the nose. That will make it look flat and it will make it look less realistic. So look at your drawings and ask yourself, like, do you do that ever? Because that's a really common thing that a lot of times people will do, is they'll put like lines around everything. And that's partly because, when we're younger and we're drawing, a lot of times that's kind of like how we sort of make sense of things. We make sense of things by putting outlines around things. So if you're drawing and you're new to this channel, you'll hear me talk about that on a lot of different videos, that I want you not to actually put a line around things, that I want you to actually use, your collections of line and your shading to sort of show, okay, this is on one plane and that's on another plane. So that's another thing that's kind of a common issue that people will sort of struggle with when they're first learning how to draw. And that's something that I always, try to help people to kind of like see that and make sure that that's not something that you're doing, because again, it'll just flatten out your drawing. It's not like the worst thing in the world or anything like that, but it'll just make it look flatter, right? So that's another thing just to kind of check. I also wanted to mention that I slightly speed up the lines or my drawing in this, but you can, in YouTube, slow it down. So if I'm going too fast and you want to see the line quality a little bit like just the regular way that I'm working, make sure that you do that, because I think it is helpful to be able to see how fast I'm actually going. I just tend to speed it up a little bit just so that it won't be like a 30-minute video. So another thing that you can always do as well is vary your speed of your line. So again, I am speeding this up a little bit, but the speed of the line, even without being sped up, is faster in this nose than it was in the second one that I drew. So that's something that you can kind of play around with, is with the which is how fast or how slow you make your lines. And for different people, for whatever reason, it will come natural. Like sometimes it's more natural for people to draw slower. For me, it's weirdly actually a little bit more natural for me to kind of draw in this quicker speed of mark. And this is like an older person's nose, and you can kind of get a sense of that with like the wrinkles on the side. So you want to kind of like observe those kinds of details, like if there's wrinkles around the, around the nose, or underneath, you can kind of show those kinds of things, and that will make it look more realistic as well. And again, in this one, you can see that the edges are pretty soft. Like I'm not using really hard edged marks. I'm kind of trying to build up the form by having a lot of the shadows that are kind of around the nose. And that's going to like give the nostril a little bit more of a lift, than if I was just using like a hard edged mark. And whenever you're cross-hatching, the concept of value is very important. So value is basically how dark or light something is, not in terms of like black or white, but in terms of how dark the shadows are or midtones. So in this, you'll notice that I have some real dark areas around the nose. And I'm going to put a link in the description to a value scale that I have another video on, which is just like an exercise. So if you're new to this concept of value, I'm going to put a couple videos in the description so you can link to, so that if again you're new to that concept, you can get another tutorial that's specifically on value. And the reason that value is so important for something like this is that when you have a full value range, it's going to give more three-dimensional quality than if you don't have that, right? So as you notice, when I start off in the drawing, it kind of looks, sort of so-so, right? It doesn't look that 3D, but as I'm layering the lines and going over the form, that's when I start to get more of a sense of it looking three-dimensional. So it's that value contrast where when you're adding lines and you keep layering, that you're going to get that good look that you're going for with cross-hatching. Another thing that's really important when you're drawing with cross-hatching and with line is using this concept of direction of line, right? So direction of line is just thinking about the direction that you go in and how you can use the direction that your lines are going in to show the form and to make it look more three-dimensional. Because if you have your lines just kind of going in any random different direction, it's not going to be as effective as if you think about your lines as helping to sort of like shape the form. So even with this, right, I'm using these arrows just to show you, but you get the sense of that you want to show the bridge of the nose, right? And it's sort of like almost like a pyramid type shape where your cheek is on one plane, and then as you trace your hand up your nose, you're going literally up, onto another plane. The bridge of your nose is higher up, it's on literally a different plane than your cheeks are, right? So you want to be able to show that area is actually literally protruding. And the way that you can do that is by using your lines in an effective way to show that, right? Because if your lines are just going any which way, it's just not gonna work as well. So you notice in this drawing, a lot of what I'm doing is thinking about the direction that the lines go in. And this is sort of a misnomer a lot of times for crosshatching, because a lot of times when people learn to crosshatch, they're just like layering lines like kind of in a grid. But that is fine in some ways. It will give you the value that I was talking about earlier. But what it won't do is it won't build up the sense of three-dimensional quality quite as well as if you use that concept of direction of line. So this one here, I'm going to show you another variation of this. In this one, and this is literally just to show another way of working, right? But I want to show, different things that you can do with cross-hatching. Just because I like to, to do that. And I like to show just different things that you might be able to do. So this one, I'm going to actually be showing you, well, what would happen if I mostly just sort of go in one direction. So notice I'm going to be going kind of in like this upper right diagonal direction. So this one has a different sense to it than the last one I drew. And, I want to just kind of give a different sense of like, yes, you could have a drawing where maybe all your marks are generally going in the sort of like upper diagonal shape, or a radial shape or something like that. And again, this is just a different way of working. And you'll notice each one of these, yeah, it looks like they all kind of look like they were drawn by me for sure, but they all are a little bit different, right? They have different types of line quality. And so I think that that's something that's really great to practice is, try seeing if you can achieve different types of line quality. Try fast lines, try slow lines, try, this one, the one that I did right before where I'm going in sort of like that diagonal direction. Try using direction of line, just experiment with all of these different things, because that's the thing about cross hatching that's so great, is that it's such a versatile medium that even though you're just using lines, there's literally so much that you can do with the marks to make it more interesting, and to give it kind of like more personality. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please hit the subscribe button if you made it this far. I hope you did. And join me for, a lot of other videos that I have. I've been working on different portrait topics, but also lots of different topics ranging from really beginner topics to more advanced things with portraits and things like that. Keep in mind that portraiture, anything with the face is more complex. If you are brand new to drawing, I recommend starting with some basic things as well. And I'll link a few different videos in the description that I think will be beneficial to you as you are learning how to draw. So again, please go ahead, hit the subscribe button and join me for a few more videos. And thank you again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.